Welcome to Scenes of Drum Sander Devastation. It's not as bad as it looks, trust me. At the end of the previous video, the previous drum sander video where I changed the bearing, I trued the drum up and I'd left it unvarnished and was going to come back when I had time and varnish it. Well, I then left it for a week, and during that time we had freak weather. We had the hottest April ever, and the temperature in here rose to 35 degrees centigrade. And I came back a couple of days ago to varnish the drum and check the trueness, and it was actually worse than before I changed the bearing. Much to my horror, it was nearly a millimetre out in total sweep. I guess that means it was maybe not more than half a millimetre out away from the centre of the axle, but yeah, almost a millimetre, and I was shocked by that. But I've almost been expecting this. I realised that having a wooden drum, you've got to allow for expansion, but I'd always assumed that the problem was moisture affecting the wood, although plywood I wouldn't, well, I don't know. Plywood I wouldn't have thought was quite so prone to thermal expansion because of the glue, and I don't know, and the fact that I'd had it varnished. But I'd always figured I'd have to go through a second iteration of truing it and then revarnishing. But I didn't think it was going to be this bad. The problems I've experienced, I think, are down to thermal expansion, which surprised me a little, because I would have thought the major problem with thermal expansion would be the axle, which would be tending to pull the drum apart. But when I sawed into the drum to put these expansion slots in, and in case you hadn't worked it out, yes, these are expansion slots. I've got 3 of them, 1, 2, 3. When I sawed the first one in the middle, the slot was trying to close up on itself. In other words, the drum was in compression, which makes sense in terms of what the drum had done, because the drum had sort of buckled sideways, as if the whole thing is being pushed in and it's having to move to allow for that. But I think it must be pushing against itself and against the bolts at the end here, because surely if the axle was expanding thermally, which, let's face it, is probably going to happen, the fact that the bearings are mounted in wood, you would have thought that it would be the wooden sides of the drum sander that would give slightly to allow for the expansion, rather than everything being rigid and the axle having to bend to allow for the expansion. So I think the problem was within the structure of the drum, but I don't fully understand what's been going on. Possibly we have a dual effect here. Possibly we have a long-term expansion of the drum, maybe down to moisture issues, and then on top of that we have short-term variation down to temperature. I can't believe that just having left the drum unvarnished for a week would cause sufficient problems just based on moisture, because I wouldn't have thought the moisture would be able to get into the plywood that quickly to cause a problem. But I could believe that long term maybe it's a problem. So I put slots in the drum, and the change was immediate. As I say, as I was cutting the slot, I could feel the slot closing up, and this has turned out to be quite a ragged slot as a result, because I was struggling to keep the saw moving. These outer slots are much neater, because I didn't have that problem sawing these. This was removing the tension, and I also noticed as I was cutting it that a crack was opening up. I think it was opening up. I haven't noticed that before. It's possible it was there before, but I thought at the time this opened up as I was cutting the slot. So I cut the slot, and immediately the problem halved. I went from nearly a millimetre out of true to half a millimetre out of true. So I just immediately retrued the drum and then varnished it. And I've come back today and it's within 0.1 of a millimetre true, which I think does represent a slight movement, but it doesn't seem to be any sort of bananaing. It just seems to be little local variations. It doesn't seem to be a global thing, you know, caused by the fact that it's shaped like a banana, I think. But it's good enough for now, and I think what I'll do is I'll revisit this in 6 months' time after we've had the heat of the summer, just to see that it's still true, and maybe revarnish it. We'll see. But expansion slots, I think, were the way to go. In case you were wondering why I used this old tenon saw, you can't actually saw down to the axle as long as you don't go don't saw at this end. I think if I'd sawed at that end, that's deep enough possibly to touch the axle, but I just made sure I didn't go any deeper than the bit at the front. So yeah, all was well. I haven't touched the axle. This should be as strong as it was before, I hope. So yeah, I just thought I'd update you on the progress, but I'm hoping that that is the end of my drum trim problems. They were never big problems because they were never more than a niggle, but hopefully now I've got the perfectly aligned drum that I was hoping for from day one. So that's it. I'll see you later. Bye.